All right, this time on the Brunswick Buzz, we are speaking with Kaili Phillips, Athletic Director at Brunswick High School, and Christa Hendley, our Athletic Trainer. Welcome to the Buzz.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about athletic training, athletic trainer, and why we have that at the high school, and who you service, and why it's so important. I know my personal experience with my own children have gone through sports at another school system. They had one and it was really beneficial. We'll go from there, but I thought, Kaili, we'll start with you, kind of just talking about how the athletic trainer fits into Brunswick High School athletics. And I think I'd also like to, hear about like the numbers, right? The number of students that you service and et cetera. And then we'll do an intro to Christa about your experience and what you...
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my third year in this position, and in my first year, we unfortunately lost to a different position, a long-time athletic training employee with us, and that person wasn't a Brunswick School Department employee, but a contracted service provider. So many high schools in this area and across the state have contracts with local medical organizations such as hospitals to provide athletic training services, but that's not that person's dedicated position. So they might spend part of their day or part of their time at that high school, but they also have to see patients and do other work at either a clinic or a hospital in addition. So though we had an athletic trainer in the past at our high school, that was not that person's only position, and they couldn't give their dedicated time to our student athletes and their families. So when that person moved on to a new position, we struggled to fill. We advertised for a year or about 8 months, right through the school year, basically of 23, 24, 24, 25?
23, 24.
23, 24, thank you. And we had no applicants. So that year I spent a lot of time finding per diem workers. So per diem workers are people who are qualified, who have the schedule flexibility to work per diem to cover games. And that was for emergency medical care that might occur at a game for either team. And that is the only coverage that we had during that school year.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So I just want to pause there, and I'm sure we'll touch on this more, but I'm envisioning a per diem person not really knowing our students, not knowing our athletes to the level of like Christa knows our students now and whatnot.
Right.
Again, I'm sure they provided adequate care and whatnot.
Right, no, for sure. And for like the level of expertise that they had and the qualifications that they had, they were very useful and beneficial to us in those moments. And many of them worked many times, so they got to know our students, but not, of course, the level at which Christa now comes in knowing our students. So while we had emergency medical care available that year, we didn't have anyone looking at injury prevention, injury rehabilitation, doing health education, doing emergency plans, giving support to coaches, giving support to families, giving home plans for students to strengthen areas that they needed in order to perform at a high level and to not get hurt. So all of those things were missing. Even though we had people at games, we didn't have any of that. So that's why we felt the need to create a position at Brunswick High School dedicated to serving the needs of our students at our school, as opposed to trying to find someone that we weren't able to find, quite frankly, for 8 months that year.
Yeah, kudos to you and to Assistant Superintendent Lambert, and I'm sure there's many other people that were part of that process. I know I was as well, but kudos to the board for seeing that value. Do you know, just off the top of your head, do most places, I heard you say this before, that most places contract?
Many do,
and then some also have an employee. Is that
some
fair to
have
say?
I would say few have an employee. Some contract, and many are without.
Just to say that again to our listeners, many are without. And that's what when we were first thinking about this, I sent an email out to other superintendents, and that was really the theme, which is we can't even get anybody to cover.
Right.
So we're doing the best we can with just, catch us, catch can. Okay. All right, cool. Anything else you want to talk about?
I hope that gives a pretty good overview of
how it happened.
The kind of the impetus behind sort of that creation of the position. And I do echo your thanks to central office staff and school board for their support in creating that position, so that we would have an opportunity to put it out there for qualified applicants and eventually find Christa in our search process.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Christa, I think, just to kind of ground our listeners, what is an athletic trainer? I mean, I know what an athletic trainer is, but I bet people are like, what is that? What are they? Is it a nurse? Is it this? PT, physical therapist? So have at it. So
Yeah, so athletic trainers are pretty all-encompassing at this point. We have a pretty significant breadth of expertise.
okay.
So Kaili already touched on the emergency response, so that acute care that you see on TV, or if your kids are playing in a game where somebody gets hurt and there's a person that runs on the field and takes care of them, that's the most like visual optics we get on us in terms of being part of our job. That is such a small part of it. We deal with a lot of administration duties, our electronic medical record system, planning emergency action plans. Every single venue at our high school has an emergency action plan. We have inclement weather policy. We have a really in-depth concussion policy that I developed, and budgeting and inventory. I work with Kaili really closely on those things. I work with our school nurse regarding the student athletes that she also sees. So that's the administrative side of things. And then I perform orthopedic evaluations on a daily basis. Any student athlete that gets hurt, and that could be during athletics or something not during athletics, if they are an athlete, they come to me. I may be the first person that they see now that our families are very well acquainted with me. Oftentimes they will wait to have their child see me versus taking them to a provider. Even if they take them to a provider, I'm then the second person that they see if it can affect their athletic participation. I will diagnose off of my orthopedic evaluations, or I'll refer out. If it's not orthopedic, I have enough knowledge to do a very basic sort of evaluation and then determine this is outside of my scope, this needs to go somewhere else. And I'm very grateful that I've been to connect pretty quickly with the healthcare community in this area to help get that ball rolling. I've been working very closely with the parents when situations like that arise. Thankfully, Reach My Teach is probably one of the best platforms I've ever used to get a hold of parents, and it makes it easy for them to get a hold of me. I then create rehabilitation plans, so the physical therapy part that you mentioned, I do that all in-house, and mind you, all of this is free to the students. We don't bill for that.
So let's pause there. So I love this, and it's hot out. It's August, right? Very hot. Next week you start preseason training, right? Is that right? Next week,
correct.
so
Monday.
mid-August. All that to say, I didn't think about the adverse weather and whatnot, but we'll get to that. But let's go back to your experience and how, maybe if you want to, how you got to become an athletic trainer, but what kind of education you have. I'd like to ground our listeners into that and share anything else about that. And then you've just given me a bunch of other things that I want to follow up on. But
So I knew I wanted to be an athletic trainer since I was 17.
Oh, cool.
I played soccer and lacrosse when I was in high school. I tore my ACL. And I had really good physical therapy, but I went to the largest high school in New Hampshire, and they only had 2 athletic trainers. I didn't even know who they were. That's no fault of their own. That just reflects the size of our athletic population. And I got really good PT, but I didn't necessarily get the mental portion. The mental portion of injury is really significant. And athletic trainers are really important to that process, to recognize like fear avoidance behaviors and then make that a part of the patient's physical therapy and reconditioning. And I sort of missed that piece because athletic trainers really fill that gap. And when I realized that that was a job that I could go to college for and do, I was just like, I never want somebody to slip through the cracks if they're a patient of mine. Not that that happened on purpose with me, but I thought I could intentionally fill that gap. And so I explored physical therapy a little bit, and then I realized I didn't want to be in 4 walls all day. And I really liked the fluidity of the schedule, the different settings, and just a highly functional, active population that's pretty highly motivated regardless of what level you're at. So I did my undergraduate degree in athletic training at Colby Sawyer College, and then I went straight into my master's. I graduated undergrad in 2011, so I've been an athletic trainer for 14 years. I went to East Stroudsburg University down in Pennsylvania. I did my master's in athletic training there, and then I completed my doctor of athletic training in 2020.
Whoa,
so as you can see, I love athletic training. Like,
you're all in.
All of it
you're
in.
All in for a long time too.
Yep.
So that's really, is that typical for athletic trainers to do the whole doctorate piece?
No, so that's actually really growing, which is really encouraging to see.
Okay.
Athletic trainers, we work a heavy schedule. That is something that the profession is trying to make better, is that work-life ratio. Because the nature of athletics requires us to be in 6 days a week, sometimes 7, on holidays, on vacation time. It just is part of it. And so people don't usually kind of go that whole way. But I was so all in on this profession.
Passionate about it obviously, and
Yes.
you're like, this is my
Yes.
purpose. if
And I
you will.
wanted to teach. You
Okay.
have to have the degree above the level you're teaching.
Okay.
So once I got my doctorate, I started teaching master's level courses. So I lived in Kentucky for about 10 years.
Yeah.
So I taught at the University of Kentucky in their master's program. And I also taught here in Maine at the University of New England because I used to work as an athletic trainer at UNE before I came to Brunswick.
Okay.
People ask me all the time, like, what would you do if you couldn't be an AT? And I throw out, I'm like, oh, I'd be a vet. I love animals. But truly, there's nothing I would rather be doing.
Yeah.
The majority of my career experience is at the collegiate level, primarily D3. I thought I would be a D3 athletic trainer forever.
Okay.
When I got to UNE, I loved it. I loved it when I left. It was not an easy decision, but I was one of the per diem athletic trainers that helped last year. I helped during basketball when I had the time, and then I helped during the spring, mainly with boys and girls lacrosse and some softball games.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my family, I was like, it's worth the hour drive to go up there and help. And this community is special. And I connected with a lot of the student athletes. I really, really liked Kaili. Everything about the Brunswick community felt like it was pulling at me.
Yeah.
And Kaili kind of jokingly mentioned that she was wanting to get a position through the school district, and why don't you come work for me? I was like, no, I love what I'm doing. I'm happy where I'm at. But it was like a seed had been planted, and I couldn't stop thinking about it because the more I came up to help, the more I looked forward to coming back. And I sat on it and I thought about it and I talked about it with her for 3 solid months. And then I went to my boss at UNE and said, I'm applying for this position. I'm not looking to leave UNE, but this is a special opportunity that I can't not look into.
Yeah.
And then everything just kind of fell into place very naturally. And I left UNE and came to Brunswick. And it's impossible not to love this community. I have
That's
loved
true.
every second that I have
Okay.
been here.
Yeah.
And at this point in my career, being 14 years in, I remember thinking, I want my ripple effect to go as far as possible. And collegiate athletes are very, very lucky to have athletic trainers pretty much at their disposal with the level of expertise that I have, because I am an expert in my field at this point with what I've done. And I said to myself, why shouldn't these high school athletes have access to me? What makes them any less deserving? And it's nothing. So I've been very pleased to bring the style of athletic training and the approach to patient care that I have to the high school, and it's been super rewarding.
You bring up, well, one, you're again, I knew that you were doctorate level. I didn't remember your experience all the way through, and that also that you were a high school athlete and torn in the ACL and kind of got you on this path. But all that to say, I'm kind of going back to the mental health aspect of this, and I hadn't thought about that. And I don't want to talk about my own family's experiences, but one of my children had multiple ACL tears through their athletic career, et cetera, and that psychological aspect of going back to a sport that they love, a really big component. All that to say that I'm glad you brought that up, because I know I've seen that firsthand myself. Let's talk a little bit about injury prevention. You talked about that, health education, and home plans.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
gotta be part
of
of that
course.
process, right?
Yeah, one of the, biggest upsides of having a full-time athletic trainer at the school is that I'm there for all practices and games.
Gotcha.
And so I'm constantly watching these student athletes participate in their sport. As you come through your education as an athletic trainer and as you do the job, you learn the biomechanical demands of each sport, and you learn what motions are functional, what dysfunction looks like, and then how that dysfunctional movement can lead somebody potentially down a path to injury or conditions and things like that. And so a good portion of my time is spent just watching the way these student athletes move and recognizing where dysfunction could be happening, even if they might not be having pain yet, or they might not be having issues yet. What I see is then communicated to the coaches to ask them, because they're the experts in their sport.
Yeah.
This is what I'm seeing with the way this person is doing this movement, the way they're throwing a baseball,
Yes.
or the way that they're taking a cut in basketball.
Yep.
Is this, or just the way they walk, is this going to potentially lead to injury? And so we can talk early intervention at that stage. And then a big part of rehab and reconditioning is making sure that you are then sort of covering that gap that may have led them there. So if somebody has a knee injury or a hip injury or whatever, we rehabilitate that. But then we also usually consider the other side of the body, because we have two sides of everything basically.
Yep.
So we want to make sure that those are equal, because one side usually is not equal to the other side, and we don't want them to then injure that side.
Yep.
And then we, look at weaknesses in the joints around that body part potentially that could have led them there. So many knee issues, many knee conditions come from a lack of strength and stability at the hips and at the glutes.
Wow.
So in the rehab plans, I'm not just giving them knee exercises, I'm giving them exercises that go up towards the trunk of their body, because that's going to directly affect their knees. Okay. So it's sort of like a full picture, like start to finish.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I teach the kids this as they go. So they know, Christa always says, healthy knees, strong hips. Yeah. And so that's why I incorporate a lot of that stuff into their rehab plans.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been really awesome educating them as to what I do, why I do it, and then what their ownership of that is as well. They have to have buy-in.
Right? Yeah, you got to buy-in, but I'm envisioning a high school athlete, they got to be a little bit like a sponge, right? They're committed, one to the, I would envision, right? But right, so they must love that. Those kind of things, like those activities or suggestions.
Especially once they start to get better, right? Because they sort of see the fruits of their labor, and that's oftentimes when they will get bought in. They're, especially if it's going to take an hour extra in their day, because they have so many things running through their heads all the time. Our Brunswick student athletes are involved in so many things, but if I can convince them that it's worth the half hour, 45 minutes with me, and then they see the benefit of it, it gets the compliance up, it gets them coming back.
Yeah. Talk to me how you manage those home plans,
right,
and what that looks like. Probably different for every student.
Yeah, I mean, as a collegiate athletic trainer prior to coming to Brunswick, I didn't work with parents.
Oh, okay.
You don't at that level.
Sure.
They're over 18.
Sure.
They're not near their families. And in this is one of the many ways that Kaili has been very helpful to me, is that she has taught me how to utilize parents almost as a tool.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in the athletic training world, working with parents can sometimes be seen as a bit of a hindrance. That has not been my experience at Brunswick. They are highly appreciative, highly involved in some really positive ways to get the kids engaged with me and get them doing and encouraging them to do the things that will help them get better, and also that prevention side of things. And so if I feel like compliance is struggling with a student athlete, I may reach out to their parent and say, hey, they have this injury. This has been my plan with them. These are the barriers that we're running into. Can you help? Or if they have a specific medical history that could be relevant to what's going on, I'll send them a Reach My Teach message and ask them to schedule a phone call with me and say, hey, can you give me some background? Let me know what is specific to your child. What is the best way that I can support them? And they're always happy to give me that information. Because our student athletes are so highly involved in so many things, that is when a home exercise plan can be helpful. They may realistically not have a half an hour to an hour to work with me after their initial evaluation. Yeah. And so thankfully I know these student athletes well enough to determine if they'll be a good fit for a home exercise plan. Some aren't. Even engaging the parents and even the parents encouraging them, they just might not do their home exercise plan. So those students stay with me. But there's a lot of times where I do the initial evaluation, I take them through their first PT session, and then I say, listen, I know you've got X, Y, and Z on your schedule. I'm going to send you a home exercise plan. I always teach them how to do it first. Yep. It has pictures, it has explanations, how many times in a week they should be doing it. Okay. I print it out, and I also send an email. And then I send a message to the parents, hey, I sent this home exercise plan home with them. If you guys need bands, I can give you that. This is what they're going to need equipment-wise, and this is when I'm going to follow up. Because another bonus of me being on site is that I have supplies that I buy every single year, and I can loan those supplies out to students so that they don't have to go buy them. Our students never have to go buy TheraBands. They never have to go buy crutches or boots or ankle braces or slings, and they usually bring it all back. And so that's a cost that these parents don't have to front anymore because I can give it to them.
I'm not sure if patient confidential.
Yeah, for sure, especially in a small community like this. Like,
Especially.
confidentiality is super
Yes.
important, and
Yes.
and the spaces that we're in the high school are very small. So athletic trainers are bound by HIPAA just like everybody else.
Okay.
I am the only person that has access to our electronic medical records. Any records that I have on paper are locked in a cabinet, and my office is locked every night. So we meet those standards.
Yeah.
When it comes to discussion and what could potentially be considered a public space, I try very, very, very hard not to do that. I always ask students to step out if I need to have a private conversation that they cannot overhear.
Yep.
People will ask constantly, is this person injured? What injury did they get? And I just respectfully say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that information. Even kids will be like, what's going on with so-and-so? And I say, I don't know, ask them.
Yeah.
Or I can't share that information with you, but maybe you ask them. People are so invested in the kids that they know, that they've watched grow up playing
Yeah.
sports,
Yeah.
that to them, it's not a big deal to walk up to me, it's not their child, and ask me what's going on. And I just always have to be very cognizant that I cannot share that information with them. And everybody is always super nice about that. And even just like talking to Kaili about something, trying to figure out like how to navigate a situation, we close the door, we step away and we talk very quietly, or we excuse ourselves. Same thing with Nurse Jenny. If I need to go check in with her, I wait until there's no kids in there, and then we close the door and we catch up privately. It's very much a need to know basis, and do we have consent to share that personal health information, and keeping it as
Thank you.
quiet as possible,
Yeah.
and not discussing student athletes with people that aren't their parents is really important.
Kaili, can I pivot to you for a second and talk about in-game support? How do you juggle that? Because there's a lot of sport.
Yeah, well, I actually might have to throw it back to Christa. She does her own
Scheduling?
scheduling
Okay.
with that.
Okay, cool.
Well, we work together on it. So
Okay.
obviously, I do all of the scheduling, and then throw it to her to sort of determine. And she does a rotation to make sure that all of the sports see her and that she sees all the sports.
Okay, let's jump in that direction.
And she also prioritizes high contact
That was my
over
next
lower
question.
contact
Okay,
because
so right, that's
an-
logical, right?
it's
So
a-
there's certain sports that
yeah.
you need to have.
I mean,
maybe
it's a
eyes.
it's a necessity, right? So maybe she can speak a little bit
Okay.
more
Yeah.
to those couple items. Yeah.
I think we've done a really good job this last year establishing how to exactly do that, because that happens a lot, especially in the fall, where we will have a soccer game going at the same time as field hockey, at the same time as volleyball.
Yep.
It's really important to me that these teams get equal access to me. So what I did last year, and it seemed to work really well, is so say those three sports all start at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. I decide this is the day I am going to be out at field hockey, and when their game is over, I'll go to soccer, and when their game is over, I'll go to volleyball. But we all have radios, and if anybody needs me because an injury has happened, I leave the game that I'm at and I go over
Yeah.
to wherever it is that I'm needed. That's a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Say all three of those teams play again at the exact same time on Thursday, I then start at soccer
Okay.
on Thursday, and I rotate.
So you're really mindful of ensuring that.
I try to be.
Yeah. Sounds like you definitely.
And they
try
all
to-
know that they come out to me. I have a whole setup on every single sideline of the sport. I have a table.
Okay.
I have all my emergency
I was going to
equipment.
go there for equipment.
I have
So
the
you a tape?
gator.
You do.
I
Okay.
have my kit with all the taping and wrapping and bracing that I
Yeah.
could need. So they all feel very comfortable coming to me. I send an email out to coaches on either Sunday or Monday every single week with my schedule, when I'll be at the
Great.
school, and then on these game days, this is where you can find me.
Yeah, yeah.
If anything changes, I update them. The only time we have conflict is if I have to travel with football, because I do
Okay.
travel with football.
Oh, you
So
do. Okay.
I already have the whole fall schedule. I've already identified for this season where those conflicts are, and I've already arranged for a per diem athletic trainer
Okay.
from Midcoast. She's
Okay.
fabulous. Her name's Sarah, and she comes and she covers the
Those-
games
if
at
you're
home
not able to,
so that I
gotcha,
can
gotcha.
travel with football.
Okay.
The same thing goes in the winter. I go back and forth between hockey and basketball. We do co-op, as you know, with MTA for swim,
Yep.
so I don't cover those. And then our meets for indoor track are through the KVAC, but I try to be visible at those as well. I covered 2 of those last year, and then I just made an appearance at the conference meet so that they feel important as well.
Yeah.
So I work very closely with Sarah Leonard, our primary per diem athletic trainer, to make sure everything is covered all the time and that the coaches always know where I will be and when. Yeah, it's actually been like very nice to provide that so that nobody ever feels left out.
Well, I think that's, I assumed, great to hear. We have a lot of students that participate, and that's why I was like trying to get my head around, like, how do you do that all? I mean, you can envision, you talked about your high school in New Hampshire having 2, and you still didn't engaged. So it's got to be, but it sounds like you do a phenomenal job do that. Let's talk about equipment and support.
Yeah, so if we're talking the sidelines of a game, I have a treatment table.
Okay.
So I always have a way to examine an athlete if they have an injury. I also use that table to tape people. So if we have, a doubleheader for soccer, JV plays first, then varsity, or flip-flop, the players from the second game usually come to me at halftime of the first game and get taped right there on the sideline. So I have the table for those purposes. Yep. I have 2 sets of crutches, a tall and a regular size. Okay. There's been times where we have needed those, and I've been grateful to have them. I also have an AED and a splint bag on the sideline. So the splint bag has multiple different size splints. That way, if I need them in an emergency, I have them. I also have a cervical collar in case I need to immobilize anybody's cervical spine. The AED is super duper important. We were super lucky this year to be able to use some grant money to buy 2 more AEDs. There is not one single facility that our athletes will be at where an AED won't be present. And that is incredibly important to me. So if our teams are practicing at Crimmins, there's an AED there. If we're playing softball and baseball at Bowdoin, which those fields are half a mile from the closest AED, I have one. I have one at the high school. I bring one to the rink at Bowdoin. Everywhere these kids will be playing their sports for Brunswick High School, there will be an AED.
Wow, and that was through a grant?
That was through a grant. And there will always be one with me, and then there will always be one in the field house at the high school. Because before we purchased those AEDs, if it was a game day, that AED was with me.
And you have to run across, or the volleyball, like you did that example. Those are pretty far distances when you're talking seconds.
So now I'll have an AED with me, and there will be one in the field house.
But that's really cool.
That's there. And then I obviously have my kit, so tape, wrap, everything from eye wash to nail clippers, cotton pads, everything that I could need to take care of any kind of injury on the sideline. That's the goal to have there. I do have 2 treatment tables that are portable. So during preseason, when I'm outside all the time at practices, I set up those 2 tables outside of that room. I have a table on the inside, and I will be busy all of preseason. Those tables will get used. I bring my physical therapy equipment out there. I have balance pads, I have TheraBands, I have cones, I have hand weights, I have hand rehab, I have putty, things like that. I have marbles. People are going to think this gross, but they pick them up with their toes to do foot and ankle rehab. Exactly.
The kids think that's very gross.
But I get that.
Let me put it out there.
Some of them.
I clean them after every use.
Okay, just for everybody listening, right?
Yeah.
They're cleaned, but
and just this summer in my indoor athletic training room, there used to be a wall through the middle of my office. That wall's gone now. There's tons of space now for the student athletes to do their PT, because I used to have to stick them out in the hall. So there's all of these things that go into this enormous scope of what I'm able to give them. We have walking boots. We have ankle braces. They borrow the ankle braces, they give them back. They use the boot, they give it back. And it's all right there. So they get hurt, I can send them home with everything that they could need to at least get them to the next day. We are very, very lucky that on the sidelines of football, we have Dr. Steve Katz that volunteers his time to come be on the football sidelines with me. And the number of times that he helped last year, even if it's not necessarily an emergency, sometimes athletic trainers don't travel with the teams that come see us. They're on the other side of the field. So sometimes he'll go over there so I can stay on our home sideline.
I have not met him, but I got to thank him.
He is lovely and has been very helpful. I called him at 9:30 at night one night about an ACL injury. Saw her the next day. And that, we're not tied to him through a contract in any way. He's just doing that. And he's not getting tons of referrals from us. But it's yet another person that just wants to be there to give the student athletes a good experience and be helpful.
So it sounds like part of your job, though, is also working with coaches, right? And maybe, I'm envisioning, but would a coach come into you and saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this? But what does that interaction look like?
So I will interface with our coaches during season on a daily basis. A lot of them will stop by and see me on their way out to practice. They get the updates on their injury reports, because a lot of them work full time during the day. So flurrying them with text messages and updates isn't always the best for them, but they will stop by, they'll get their information, or I'll walk out to the field if I have time, if I'm not in the middle of PT sessions, and give them those updates. Another way that I use coaches is, like I mentioned before, they're the experts in their sport. So if we have a patient who's injured and has limitations, but they can still do some activities, I discuss that with the coach. You know, John Smith has this injury. These are the things he can't do. What does your practice plan look like where you could potentially utilize him? And if their practice plan doesn't cater to that and they can't necessarily get them in, I will do stuff with them as part of their rehabilitation program, because thankfully I've watched sports long enough now where I know, you know, per sport and per position, what their movements look like, and we just start retraining those. Wow. And so that's how I work with them a lot.
One more topic that I think is really important, I know is important, and I think our listeners will want to hear, is a little bit about the concussion protocol. Let's talk a little bit about that and then we'll wrap up. But talk to me about what that looks like, what it means. I'm not sure if people even understand what a concussion protocol is, but how the athletic trainer fits into that protocol.
Yeah, so last year when I started at Brunswick High School, I completely overhauled the procedure manual. So all of what we have has been written by me and based on the best current scientific literature. Okay. The concussion protocol was super important to me in that sense. There's been a lot of developments about the best way to work through a concussion with a patient just in the last 2 to 5 years. Yeah. So if somebody sustains a hit to their head or body and then they're exhibiting concussion symptoms, I determine that on the sidelines of a game if it's home. If they're away and they're without me, there's always an AT at a game that our student athletes are going to. They'll determine that. Sometimes Nurse Jenny Strout is getting those because it may have happened outside of athletics. Then they go see her.
Okay,
yes,
right.
And she does her own evaluation and then gives me a copy. So we evaluate their symptoms. We see if it's in line with the mechanism of injury for a concussion, and then I give them an evaluation. I ask about their orientation, their immediate memory. We also do delayed memory. We do concentration questions. We do balance. We do eye movement. We do what's called an upper and lower quarter screen and cranial nerves to make sure that, the nerves that could be affected by a concussion are functioning as they should, so that if it's an emergency, we know to refer. So if it's not an emergency and I, have diagnosed them with a concussion, at that time, their parents can choose if they take them to the doctor or not. I do not require that. I can diagnose them with a concussion and then move into treatment. If they want to go, they're always welcome to do so. That's when we begin the protocol. So every single day, and we use impact concussion baseline testing. Yes, sir. Everybody takes a baseline in preseason. They have to have it taken before the first competition of their sport, or they're not cleared for a game. So I've already sent those out for this year to most kids. They take that. Impact has a daily reporting app so I can track their symptoms. Once their symptoms get low enough, that's when I start doing low intensity activity. So years ago, it used to be complete and total rest, no physical activity until you were symptom free. Now what the science is telling us is that once your symptoms get low enough, low intensity physical exercise, giving just the right amount of blood flow to the brain, helps those symptoms resolve. I also work really closely with Nurse Jenny to inform our teachers about any academic accommodations students may need. They may need extended time on tests, extended deadlines on projects. They may need to be able to wear sunglasses during class. We're so based educationally on computers, they may need notes printed out for them because they can't look at a screen.
But you help throughout that whole process,
yes,
assist teachers, parents, and students.
This summer, the state of Maine actually made some amendments to the concussion policy that the district uses, and Sean Lambert let me have a voice in that. Both me and Jenny put our input into that. So that was really cool, actually. And so that is the start of the return to play protocol. That is day one, is getting them doing low intensity activity. And then every day after that, as long as their symptoms are resolving, their physical intensity gets longer, or their physical activity gets more intense and longer. And then once they're symptom free, once they take their impact test again, because it has to return to their baseline or better. That is when they get to go be cleared by the doctor. We are not allowed as athletic trainers to clear from concussions yet. So the doctors do that portion. I get a note. They do one more day of unrestricted activity with me, and then they're free to return to their sport. So that could happen anywhere from 7 days to weeks. And sometimes kids develop post-concussion syndrome, which requires more care. But most oftentimes it's within a couple of weeks. Every single day these kids are in the protocol, I'm updating their coaches, and in increments I'm updating their parents as well, about where they're at in the protocol, what days they're doing, or if they're not showing up. Sometimes kids get overwhelmed with their symptoms and they just want to go home when the school day is over. But I really like a face-to-face check-in, especially if they've done their symptoms, so I can get my eyes on them and actually see how they're doing. And so I involve the parents a lot in that, just to keep them on track in their protocol. So the biggest difference that everybody is seeing now, and I make sure to explain this, is that your child doesn't have to be symptom-free before starting physical activity. Don't stick them in a dark room. You don't have to wake them up every 20 minutes. It's actually good for them to stimulate their brain sub-threshold of increasing the symptoms that they already have. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. Wow. And we're very lucky to have Impact. There's other programs out there, but Impact is a really good piece of our treatment puzzle in order to make sure that we're hitting the landmarks that we need to safely return somebody to play.
So I think you've talked a lot about why Brunswick is special, and this, to me, this is an example. This is year 6 for me, and every time I have different folks on the Brunswick Buzz, but this is one of those examples where it's like, wow, we're really doing something special here. So thank you, Christa. One of the areas, though, in Brunswick that we, and many districts, but particularly in Brunswick, we have a certain population of students and families that don't have access to health care. And I know we've worked hard for several years to ensure that they have access to physicals, and we've done that through, now Brunswick Cares helps us with that through Convenient MD. They still do that, but is there anything you want to talk about like that, access for families that, maybe don't have access to quality health care? Yeah,
what has been unexpected and yet incredibly positive role for me as an athletic trainer at our high school is sort of being a conduit in that way. You brought up Brunswick Cares, which helps significantly. There are many times that students will come to me as their athletic trainer with healthcare needs that I can't necessarily provide to them, but I know who might be able to. Again, I can't say her name enough. Nurse Jenny Strout is connected to so many providers in the area and uses Brunswick Cares or other ways that people donate time and resources to help people get the most basic things. We had a basketball player who needed glasses. He didn't know how to set up an appointment. His parents don't know how to set up an appointment. He had broken the glasses that they had gotten last year, but Jenny helped set all of that up and we got him glasses. They don't need a referral to see me. So oftentimes I am a starting point for many, many things. If it's not something I can provide, I go to Kaili. Hawa in our school district is super helpful in terms of resources for our new Mainers. Like, I can't sing her praises enough either. If I can't provide something, I know that there's somebody in the district, in the community that can, and there's somebody that can connect me to those people. And so to be a stopping point along the way of somebody's healthcare journey to get them what they need when they might not necessarily be able to access it in a traditional manner, and we're going the scenic route, as I like to call it, they still get to their destination.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Buzz, both Kaili and Christa. This has been so informative. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as much as I have. I have so many more questions, but I won't go there. I'm just really so excited to have you on board, both of you, and I'm really appreciative. So thank you very
thanks
much.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, thank you for listening to the Brunswick Buzz. The Brunswick Buzz is available wherever you find your podcast.